All right, guys. It is officially 2024. Happy New Year. Hopefully, your year is already off to an amazing start. So, with this podcast, with this particular episode, I'm releasing it on all of the major channel streams because this isn't going to be just sports talk or just are we not entertained or just tech talk or just life talk or just news desk or just game stream. This is everything all at once. Everything everywhere all at once. Great movie, by the way. Uh because I'm about to do something that I've never done before on this particular podcast. I'm about to give you guys my predictions for what's going to happen in 2024. Yes, even that. We'll get to that in a bit. I've got predictions on that too. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down my predictions for 2024, and I've got a lot of them. We're probably going to be here a while. And I'm going to break down the predictions by channel. So I've got my predictions for sports. I've got my predictions for entertainment and wrestling. I've got my predictions for tech. I've got my predictions for gaming. I've got my predictions for news, both here in the US and internationally. I've even got a small section kind of off to the side regarding some predictions for me personally. So, without further ado, let me get started on that by letting you know that I am, in fact, Raul Smith, Head of Development and Design over at Galactic Digital Studios. Just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. So, let's start with the sports predictions. So, I don't have a lot of NFL predictions, but I will say this. Given how the last few weeks have been going, given how the schedule's looking to shape up and the rankings are starting to shape up, I can easily see the Super Bowl 58, coming down to the Baltimore Ravens on the AFC side versus the Philadelphia Eagles on the NFC side. Now, I don't want to jump in and say, yeah, the 49ers are going to the Super Bowl just yet. There's just one tiny little thing that I want to see from the 49ers before I can officially say that they're going to the Super Bowl. And I already know Detroit's not making it. I already know Dallas isn't making it. I already know Tampa Bay or New Orleans or whoever is not going to make it. And I really don't see anybody from the AFC side topping Baltimore right now. Baltimore, to me, screams like they're the best team in the league. Just based on what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm witnessing as far as stats and everything is concerned, it just screams to me like Baltimore is making the right push at the right time. So that's my prediction for the Super Bowl: Baltimore over Philadelphia. Now, where does that leave the offseason? Well, I will tell you. I think Russell Wilson gets cut from the Broncos. I think they pretty much telegraphed it when they benched him for the game yesterday against Los Angeles. I don't see Russell Wilson coming back to Denver. He will get cut from the Broncos. They will pay him the $39 million or whatever that they owe him, and then he will sign a very modest, I would say probably about 15, maybe $20 million deal to go to the Washington Red Command team, as I like to call them, because they can't seem to decide what they want to call themselves. it's the Commanders now, but it may be something else entirely in 2 years. We don't know. They just can't seem to decide on a name. So that's my prediction for Russ. I think Arizona is going to trade Kyler Murray, and they're going to land the number 2 pick, because right now they have 2 first-round picks. They have their own, and I can't remember who the other one belonged to, but I know that it's kind of up there along with like Washington, New York, and New England. But they will trade Kyler Murray to Seattle for Drew Lock. And in that vein, there's going to be an actual quarterback competition between Murray and Geno Smith. Where does that leave Arizona? Well, Arizona, like I said, is going to have the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. And Chicago is going to assure Caleb Williams they are not going to draft him. They are instead going to try and get some offensive line help with both of their first rounders, their own and Carolina's. And that's going to help Justin Fields. That leaves Arizona at number 2 to go get Caleb Williams. Now, there is a possibility that they could always work out a deal with the Patriots for their draft pick, as well as, I forget the guy's name, the guy that's there now. I'm blanking on his name. So I think that's what's going to happen, is they're either going to work out a deal with New England where New England will get Caleb Williams, or they themselves will draft Caleb Williams, kind of keep him closer to home. Plus, with all the demands that all the demands that Caleb Williams was exuding through his representatives earlier in the season, Arizona seems to me like the one team that would probably be willing to accommodate him in partial ownership. So there's that. I predict the Cowboys will lose in the divisional round again. They will miss out on the NFC Championship game again. And it will come down to probably Philadelphia and San Francisco. Aaron Rodgers will not play a full season in New York. He will watch as my cat tries to destroy the carpet behind me. But no, Aaron Rodgers will not play a full season. He will simply be too hurt from his Achilles. Keep in mind, for normal people, an Achilles injury is life-altering. Pardon me for 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So, I was talking about Aaron Rodgers. I think for normal people, an Achilles injury is pretty life-altering. Like, it affects your ability to walk at a faster pace. It affects your ability to plant your foot and use your foot as, a ground, a center for, kind of helping give yourself a little bit more strength and positioning. And I can only imagine for football players, it's going to be even worse. Yes, I know Aaron Rodgers made headway or made headline news earlier in the season saying that he was going to come back earlier than expected. But I think that was more a ploy to get everybody to pay attention to him, rather than the Jets. Not hard to do. But anyway, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to play a full season in New York. I think he's going to play like maybe 7 or 8 games for the Jets before they officially just say we're done. And they do to him what the Broncos did to Russell Wilson. So those are my NFL thoughts. Now I get to the fun, juicy part. My NBA predictions. And I'm going to start out hot. I think before the trade deadline, there is going to be a massive, earth-shattering, hyperbole hyping 6-team trade. Now you'll be curious to figure out, okay, who's involved in this 6-team trade? I will tell you. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the Miami Heat, you already see where that's going a little bit, the Golden State Warriors, the Toronto Raptors, the Detroit Pistons, and one other team that is basically there just to throw draft picks into the mix and maybe get a better role player or something. The trade will involve Donovan Mitchell going to the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat will then send Kyle Lowry to Toronto. Toronto will then, in kind, send RJ Barrett to Miami. No, wait. No, that doesn't sound right. Well, anyway. Pascal Siakam will then be sent from the Raptors to Golden State. Golden State will then send Draymond Green to the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons will then send Bojan Bogdanovic to probably Golden State. And then Golden State will then send Chris Paul to whoever has cap room. I didn't really see who all has cap room. And then draft picks will be thrown around here and there, and yeah. But basically that will effectively end not only the Donovan Mitchell era in Cleveland, it will end pretty much any chance of anybody not named Boston winning the Eastern Conference. More on that in a minute. It'll also end the Pascal Siakam rumors as far as where he's going to wind up, because I don't think he leaves Golden State high and dry. Draymond Green's era or time in Golden State will come to an end. Chris Paul's chances of winning an NBA championship most likely will be coming to an end. So all of that, and then of course Bojan going to Golden State will be just a massive game changer for them. And there was one other. Andrew Wiggins probably going to Toronto. And then, of course, salaries and draft picks to figure out. I mean, it's a very convoluted. Anytime you get more than 3 teams involved in an NBA trade, it gets very convoluted. And this is going to be the definition of convoluted, but I think it's going to benefit pretty much everybody involved, both short-term and long-term. Speaking of trades, I predict the Minnesota Timberwolves will finally trade Karl Anthony Towns. I think his time in Minnesota was up the moment they brought in Rudy Gobert. I said it when they brought Gobert in that trade, and I'm saying it again now. I think it was a big mistake to pair the two of them up. And I think now with the offense and defense both centered more around Gobert, it leaves a guy like Karl Anthony Towns, who is more of a spot up shooter, someone that can stretch the floor, kind of leaves him a little bit out of the loop. Now, because of the other trade that I just mentioned, there isn't going to be a whole lot of interest in Karl Anthony Towns, except for one team who's also looking to offload their superstar in a trade. Zach LaVine. I think a straight up trade between Minnesota and Chicago will send Zach LaVine to the Timberwolves for Karl Anthony Towns to the Bulls. Now, what does that mean for LaVine? Minnesota, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, Minnesota is a scary, dangerous team. I mean, they've already got a good three-headed dragon on their starting lineup between point guard Mike Conley, their superstar Anthony Edwards, and their star center Rudy Gobert. You add LaVine to that lineup, you may be looking at the favorites to win the entire Western Conference. I don't think I'm hyping that up. I think that's pretty legitimate. More on that in a minute. I think DeMar DeRozan will get traded to a team that has cap room and then bought out, and will sign a veteran minimum deal to play finally. I say finally because he's been crowing about wanting to go to play for the Lakers for years. He will finally sign a 1-year minimum deal to go play with the Los Angeles Lakers. Not that it'll matter, but he'll at least get to live his dream. The conference finals in the NBA will shape up like this, in my opinion. I think it's going to be Minnesota and Denver in the West, and it's going to be Boston and Miami in the East. And I think Denver pulls off the upset against Minnesota. It would technically be an upset because Minnesota would be the 1 seed, and Boston would make short work of Miami. But the key there is that the 2 former Utah Jazz players, Gobert and Mitchell, will have made their first conference finals appearance before the Jazz make the playoffs. Something I've been trying to tell people for 2 years now. And who do I think will win between Denver and Boston? I think Boston's defense and the fact that they haven't played, a deep playoff run in the last couple years, aside from the fact that they did make it to within points of making the finals last year. But they also did just add Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. I think Boston pulls it off. I think Boston ends up raising banner number 18, legitimate banner number 18, Lakers fans. So that's how I see that shaping out. Speaking of the Lakers, I predict with no first round pick to speak of, I think the Lakers advise LeBron to advise his son Bronny to stay 1 more year in USC. I think Bronny stays in school for 1 more year, and LeBron signs a 1-year extension with the Lakers. That, of course, will fuel speculation on where Anthony Davis is going to go. I don't really have a firm answer on, Anthony Davis's future, but LeBron signing a 1-year extension so that he can ultimately decide, once Bronny decides where he's going to go. I think that's pretty much a surefire way of fueling a full year of speculation and making it all about LeBron, because at the end of the day, that's what's important. Is what is important in the NBA is what is important to LeBron James. Because LeBron James, according to his fans, is the NBA. Yeah. I can make one other prediction about LeBron in 2024. I will not ease up on my LeBron hate. Y'all did this to yourselves. You know that, right? Okay, just making sure. The NBA will officially announce at some point in 2024 that they are expanding to 32 teams, adding expansion franchises in the towns of St. Louis, Missouri, and Seattle, Washington, and that will bring back the great franchise that should have never been taken away in the first place, the Seattle Supersonics. As for a team name for St. Louis, I know the hockey team there is already called the Blues. I don't know. Maybe something like Falcons? I don't know. Anyway, speaking of new teams and new places, the Mavericks will entertain the idea, now that the sale is finalized between Mark Cuban and the family that owns a bunch of Vegas casinos. The Dallas Mavericks will entertain the idea of relocating the team to Las Vegas after the town of Dallas refuses to give in to their, or acquiesce to their request for a new stadium. Other teams that will also be entertaining ideas for relocating to Vegas will be the Orlando Magic, the Phoenix Suns, and the Utah Jazz. I mean, if the Jazz are willing to relocate from downtown Salt Lake to Sandy, anything's possible. Just saying. And the Detroit Pistons, rounding off our NBA predictions portion of this particular episode, the Detroit Pistons will win 8 games this year, barely, and I do emphasize barely, avoiding the all-time record in NBA history for the worst single season record. And they will still only be able to pick 4th in the NBA draft. Gotta love the lottery system. So that wraps up the sports predictions. Let me switch over to entertainment. And we're going to start with wrestling. I know some of you don't like that idea, but here we go. I predict that AEW, All Elite Wrestling, will sign a new TV rights deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. So they will stay on TBS and TNT. This will also include Ring of Honor, who will officially be on the Max streaming service by the end of the year. I predict WWE's Monday Night Raw will sign a TV rights deal to stay with Comcast, NBC Universal, and become exclusive to Peacock. So much like Ring of Honor will be on a streaming service exclusively, so will Monday Night Raw. I predict that wrestling in general will open up much more expansively and be more cooperative as opposed to competitive. I think the idea of competition in professional wrestling kind of, I wouldn't say died, but it went away a little bit with the quiet resignation of Vince McMahon. And that's a good thing. I don't think competition in wrestling is necessarily bad, but it's also not helping, especially when you're not drawing more than 1 million viewers on any program right now, aside from SmackDown. But that's only because they're on Fox for the moment. They'll be moving after next year as well. But this exclusivity deal, going kind of circling back to Raw, this exclusivity deal will keep WWE on the Peacock streaming service for another 5 years. So there's that. Speaking of TV rights deals, I predict that the NBA will strike new deals with Prime Video. So much like Prime Video is right now the streaming service home for Thursday Night Football for the NFL, they will now also become the exclusive streaming home for Saturday Night Basketball in the NBA, as well as Sunday Night Football. So the NFL will be kind of transitioning away from NBC more to Prime Video, and I'll tell you why. Because the NBA will land a major, I mean major, TV rights deal that will see them on TNT, Prime Video, ESPN, and for the first time in nearly 20 years, NBC. Yes, we're going to get the return of Round Ball Rock, one of my favorite themes of all time. You cannot imagine, as a basketball fan, how hyped the beginning of the NBA on NBC was for me, watching those Saturday and Sunday games. I mean, that was my childhood. That was like, be still my beating heart, Speaking of Warner Brothers, I predict that they will not be the ones to buy Paramount Studios and Paramount Plus, but rather Amazon. And it kind of circles back to what I mentioned before about Jeff Bezos being a sci-fi guy and seeing money in sci-fi. He is going to buy Paramount on the condition that there is a renewed emphasis on Star Trek. So, and we'll get to Star Trek here in a minute, but with Picard having finished up and Discovery finishing up, Lower Decks is going to be the only Star Trek property that's still out there. But I think there's going to be a more renewed emphasis on a more, I don't want to say episodic, but a more structured format for Star Trek. And I think Jeff Bezos and Amazon are going to be the ones that's going to kind of usher that new era in. Speaking of Amazon, Twitch will undergo a massive overhaul to their overall service. And this will be done in a way to help compete more with YouTube and Facebook Live. Now, circling back to Star Trek, I believe that regardless of what happens in this final season of Discovery, regardless of where they decide to take the story, there will be people online that will shit on it. You're not going to please those people. Just ignore those people. Focus more on the people that have been watching the show and supporting the show since day one. Give them the proper ending to the story, not the neckbeards in La La Land or X or whatever the fuck. Don't focus on them. And lastly, for the entertainment section, I predict that the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, starting with Deadpool 3, will undergo a massive reboot. I predict all of these projects that they're announcing for, like, Echo and not Deadpool, but Daredevil and Agatha Harkness and all these other properties is going to be kind of like the ushering in of a new era. And they're going to kind of redo the entire MCU. Now, I don't predict they're going to bring Tony Stark back or Captain America or anything like that, but they're going to have more of an emphasis on these other characters, like Daredevil, like Agatha, like Deadpool. And it's going to be more of an emphasis on them rather than, oh, well, this is what Tony Stark would have done. At some point, you got to, focus more on the future rather than the past. But that's the entertainment section. For tech, and some of this is going to be a little bit inside knowledge or inside slang, but bear with me. I'll try and do my best to explain it to all the people that may not know all the ins and outs. I predict that AI, and this is probably something you should have seen coming, AI will become even more powerful and will completely take over the tech support industry. So laying off, I want to say, roughly tens of thousands of jobs in the United States and several more overseas. Man, India's going to be pissed. Medical tech will help discover not only a cure for Alzheimer's, but also for cancer in 2024. I know I'm being very optimistic about that one. But hey, it's nice to have dreams, right? I predict the programming language Perl, support for it will be discontinued in 2024. Now, I've mentioned Perl in the past on the podcast. This was probably in the Legacy podcast, I want to say episode 15 or 16, somewhere in there. I don't think that Perl is going to be long for the world. I mean, think about it. If you go on, sites like Udemy and Codecademy, it's not even on their curriculum anymore. There are hardly any job openings anymore that are looking for Perl programmers. Most Perl programmers that I know have already moved on to Python. So there's that. WordPress will become the preferred CMS for big corporations in 2024, moving them away slowly from Drupal. Now, the reason I'm saying that is a lot of the people's complaints about WordPress is that out of the box, it's not a whole lot. And in terms of security, it doesn't offer a whole lot of security. You have to download a bunch of plugins and a bunch of themes to get more secure, get more options, so on and so forth. And that's true. But once you know how to do all those themes and all those plugins, you're golden. You're sitting pretty. And I will explain why I think that's going to be big for big corporations. Because this goes to my other WordPress themed, no pun intended, prediction. WordPress and React will work together cooperatively to create a custom theme with plugins to help React developers get more involved in WordPress development. Support for CSS older than version 3 and support for HTML support, anything older than 5, will also be discontinued in 2024. I predict that Twitter/X, if it doesn't die in the year 2024, it will be mortally wounded. You did it to yourself, Elon. You did it to yourself. Bluetooth latency will improve to virtually synchronous in 2024. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you ever had a pair of Bluetooth headphones or a Bluetooth speaker or a Bluetooth anything, and you're watching a video on like Netflix or YouTube or something, if you ever notice the timing between what you're seeing on your screen, whether it be computer or TV or phone, and what you're hearing is a little off, that's latency. Because of the way Bluetooth is set up currently, there's no way to remove that delay. There's no way to remove that latency. However, I think Bluetooth will eventually get to the point where that latency is practically non-existent. And I think it happens in the next 366 days. I say 66 because it's a leap year. A host of specialized social media platforms will pop up in the year 2024. So I predict that there will be social media apps or platforms for just about anything. There will be one for video gaming. There will be one for dating. There will be one for, we already have one for politics. It's called Truth Social. There will be one for, transportation industries, stuff like that. I think that's going to end up happening in the year 2024. There will be a renewed emphasis on a return to desktop gaming in 2024. If you really think about it, laptops, no offense, just haven't really been cutting the mustard on gaming in the last several years. The technology is just not there. The ability for the computer to cool off while it's, revving up all those, graphics and whatnot is just not there. And games are becoming more and more and more complex, especially next gen games that are coming out for like PS5 and Xbox Series X. I think that that's going to have a renewed emphasis on desktop gaming. I'll get back to gaming here in a bit. Here's the part where I warned you that there's going to be some inside stuff. So there's rumors going around that they're thinking of doing a fast track, like a fast train track line, that will have people going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas in a matter of 3 hours, but without all the traffic and whatnot. And the two stations will be located in downtown Los Angeles and just outside the Sphere in Vegas. I predict not only will ground be broken for that line, but a connecting line that will then connect Las Vegas to Salt Lake City, Utah. So you will technically have a fast train going all the way from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles, passing through Vegas in a matter of hours. In that same vein, UTA, the Utah Transit Authority, will at least start making plans and presenting them to the Environmental Protection Agency, because they've gotten in trouble with them in the past already. On a front runner, which is their own version of mass transit, a front runner line going from Salt Lake City to Park City. And this will help kind of alleviate some of the traffic along I-80 going from Salt Lake to Park City and back, especially during the wintertime. Because if you ever driven up to Park City in the winter, it is a fucking nightmare. I predict they will not only make the plans for that line in 2024, they will also make plans in 2024 for the line going from Salt Lake City to Wendover, Nevada. I don't know what the logistics are going to look like as far as that goes, but it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to watch. Now that we're done with the tech predictions, wow, we're already at 40 minutes. It's going to be one of the longer episodes since the format change. Let's go to gaming, since I touched on desktop gaming. I predict the soon-to-be ousted head of Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick, in retaliation of Microsoft telling him to go take a hike, will start a new gaming studio to compete against Microsoft. But he will land in very hot water, not only because he will be violating his non-compete agreement with Microsoft, but he will also be back to his old ways in letting misogynistic assholes run the ship and making things extremely uncomfortable for anybody that's not a dickhead. I predict Nintendo will announce the Switch 2. Can announce it on E3 because E3 is dead. So they would have to hold their own little press conference online. And that they will not release the Switch 2 until 2025. I predict Sony will announce the PlayStation Plus Pass for PC, which is going to be very similar to Microsoft's PC Games Pass. Now, the difference between Sony's PlayStation Plus and Microsoft's Game Pass will be that Sony's PlayStation Plus will be inclusive on all platforms. So it'll be included on Microsoft Windows. It'll be available for Apple iOS. So either MacBook or Macs or iPhones or iTablets or whatever. It'll be available on Android. It'll be available on Linux. It'll be available on pretty much everything. I don't know what the logistics would be of playing a PlayStation game on your phone, but I'm sure they'd figure it out. I predict that there will be an open world game based on either The Boys or Invincible long before there is ever going to be one for the Avengers or for DC superheroes like Superman. There's already technically one for Batman. It's called Arkham Asylum. Great game, by the way. You should go play it. I believe that mobile gaming will completely overtake console or PC gaming in 2024, not only in the amount of people that will actually be playing those games, but in terms of revenue being generated. And I think we saw like the first little bit of that happening last year. I predict there will be a Deadpool open world game that will be announced, but it will not be released until after the Christmas season of 2025. And speaking of open world games and Christmas, there will also be a Mandalorian open world game announced by EA, because EA right now is the exclusive game studio for Star Wars, and that it will be released just in time for this upcoming Christmas holiday season. So Christmas 2024. So that's my gaming predictions. Now we get to the juicy part, the one that you cannot wait for me to tell you what I think is going to happen in the real world, as some of you like to call it. Politics and shit. I predict this Israel-Palestine or Israel-Hamas war will finally have some intervention from the United Nations. The United Nations will not only hold the leaders of Hamas responsible and bring them up on war crimes, they will also bring up Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, up on war crime charges. And this will effectively end the Israel-Hamas war for now. There will be some things happening later on, probably 2025, 2026, that will kind of ameliorate tensions and, give both sides something that they'll be happy with, but also leave them with a little bit of a nasty taste in their mouth. How real world shit happens. I predict that Vladimir Putin will begin to threaten nuclear war on all the UN allies if they don't butt out of their war with Ukraine. But combined with the overwhelming failure of this Ukraine war and him threatening to nuke countries like Spain and Germany and the UK, he will be ousted from power by people within his own camp. That doesn't necessarily mean being killed. That just means he is being removed from power. Likewise, because of this power shift in Russia, I predict that China will begin trade tariffs against Russia. I predict that North Korea will begin talks with South Korea about unifying the two nations. So very similar to how East and West Germany ultimately became one country. Now, this could be a good thing or this could be a bad thing. It all depends on your perspective. But I would imagine a unified Korea would be under the direct control of Kim Jong-un and not a U.S. ally. Speaking of the U.S. and allies, talks will begin between the United States and Mexico on how to help reduce crime along the border. And the reason why I say that is because right now, aside from China, the biggest manufacturer of electronics in the world right now is Mexico. I know that's kind of shocking, but do your research, Google it, do what you gotta do. It's there, it's all there. And the US, theoretically, if they were to strike a deal with Mexico, would then be able to get all of their manufacturing done in the same continent without having to pay a shitload of money, not only to people working in their own borders, but also people working over in Japan or China. And I think as a cost-cutting move, it would be brilliant for the United States to work with Mexico on this. Speaking of reducing crime and reducing the power that these drug overlords have on people, I predict not only in an attempt to reduce crime both here in the US and over in Mexico, but also as a political curry or political favor to curry political favor with the younger voters, President Joe Biden will sign an executive order decriminalizing marijuana on a federal level by the time the election comes around in 2024. I predict he'll probably wait till the last minute, like probably 2 or 3 days before the actual election. And speaking of the election, since you want to know my thoughts, here are my thoughts. I predict whoever wins the election, whether it be Joe Biden or Donald Trump, people are going to be pissed. You're not going to win with everybody. Just not. I don't have a firm idea of who between the two would win. It all depends on a number of factors. Decriminalizing marijuana would probably be the death knell for any Donald Trump rally. But those are my predictions for politics, which leaves one final channel for the closing tag for my predictions for 2024. And I'm going to keep this very brief since we're already closing in on 1 hour. I can't exactly say what's coming. I can't exactly explain to you what's going to happen or when, because right now, I don't even know. All I will tell you is that there are some major changes happening probably within the next 4 or 5 months. That is going to have a ripple effect, not only on this podcast, but also on GameStream. And yeah, it's going to suck at first because it's going to, really limit my, availability on doing these podcasts. But that's the reason why I'm doing these shorter. I mean, obviously today with being the exception and the misnomer. But in the long run, it's going to have a renewed emphasis and a complete format change, not only for the podcast, but also for GameStream. I will be back on GameStream. I just don't know when. It's also going to help with the expansion that I have planned for Galactic Digital Studios. That's why I mentioned the Galactic Digital Studios thing at the beginning, because I'm not only speaking as the host of this podcast today, but I'm also speaking as the head of Galactic Digital Studios and letting you know there's going to be some expansive changes with Galactic. I'm going through right now and changing some things about the SEO pages. I'm adding new SEO pages. I'm adding new content practically every day. And on top of all that, there's soon to be a renewed emphasis on mobile app development. I'm just going to leave it at that. Stay tuned. And for me personally, aside from this big change that's coming up that I can't talk about yet, I suspect by the end of 2024, there's going to be a lot more gray in my precious little facial hair. Obviously, I can't get any grayer up here because there's practically nothing up here. Clip that. So those are my 2024 predictions in the world of literally everything. But I did want to send a special shout out to everybody that throughout the last 3 or 4 months has been watching these videos, that has been listening to the podcast on Spotify or Google Play or Apple Podcasts or any of the other formats that we're on right now. My voice is starting to go. Anybody that's done that, anybody that's downloaded the podcast for their listening leisure, whether it be like a ride home from work or whatever, anybody that's donated any amount of money, even $1, to this podcast, your efforts are not going unnoticed, and they never have been. So I want to thank you again. As far as what the immediate schedule is going to look like, right now I'm not planning on much of anything this week. I'm going to wait until after Black Monday next week, when at least 7 or 8 NFL head coaches are going to lose their jobs, because that's usually what happens at the end of the NFL season. Coaches get fired and shit happens. I'm going to wait to do any more NFL talk until after that happens, since there's really not much to talk about between now and the playoffs anyway. I'm going to wait to do any more news desk stuff until something ends up happening breaking news wise. Gaming wise, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Tech wise, again, probably going to wait until something breaking news comes up. And as far as the NBA goes, I've said my piece about LeBron. I've said my piece about the Lakers. I've said my piece about everything else. So until a trade happens, I just have no desire to talk about the NBA right now. So there's that. What else is there? Oh, entertainment. There is some stuff happening in WWE. I'm going to wait until next week to give you my thoughts, because I want to see what exactly changes, even if it's a subtle change, between now and next week. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for my NFL thoughts next week. And yeah, that's going to be it for today. I want to thank you guys again for everything that you're doing for the podcast. I do want to emphasize something that some people may not realize, and that is that Google Podcasts is going away in April. that announcement was made by Google themselves. So Google Podcasts will be going away. Everything that is on Google Podcasts currently will be transitioning over to YouTube Music. I am not particularly a big fan of YouTube Music, so when that day comes, unfortunately, the only place you're going to be hearing me on the Google side is going to be YouTube, like main YouTube. So if you are on YouTube and you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. That way, anytime a new video does drop, you get notified. Maybe. Facebook, like, share, comment. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, I would appreciate any reviews that you are willing to give out. So, all that said, this is the longest podcast episode that I've done in quite some time. Yeah, that's it. That's all the predictions. That's everything. That's a wrap. That's all, folks. Until next time that I grace you, remember to include your closing tags. Thanks. Where's the remote? Where's the button? I'm pressing the button.